Well, hello everybody, and you are super welcome to today's episode of the ESG and Tech Show. My name is Susan HayesCulleton, and I am delighted to be with you here today to talk to you about the future of public transport. So let me tell you what you're going to learn during this hour-long action-packed and, of course, interactive session. What we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, look back so that we can look forward. We're going to look at some changes that have happened so far in public transport. That's where we're going to start. And then we're going to take a look at what the future may hold. And we're going to look at this from the point of view of what the COVID pandemic has done to our attitudes and to our accessibility to public transport. Then we're also going to look at some recent technologies and innovation. And of course, we will talk about Hyperloop. You cannot talk about the future of public transport without it. And then what we're going to do is we're also going to take a look at some of the up-and-coming technologies that will change things in the future, as well as, of course, what economic trends are impacting the transportation of not just people, but goods. Then what we're going to do is, at the end of our conversation today, when we look at the economic and the business side of things, we're going to bring it right down and we're going to take a look at the investing side of things. So we're going to have a chat today about a couple of stocks and how to analyze them. We're going to talk about market timing. And of course, we're also going to bring everything together in one smart VectorVest search, where I'm going to show you something that has stood the test of time, even as we look forward to something economic, like the future of public transport, or if you're looking broad-based in the market. So settle right into our conversation today, and I hope that you're ready to fasten your seatbelts as we're going to take a trip through time and across geography. Now, speaking of geography, I would love to hear where you're tuning in from today. So I've got my chat is open right here. So let's just give you a moment there to pop in where you are tuning in from. I see that Joey there is on the chat already. He's saying, welcome, this is going to be great. Certainly hope so. Hello indeed, Julie. Yes, we do see you. Julie says, greetings from London. Can you see my comment? I absolutely can. And of course, Julie, the last time that we were broadcasting the ESG and Tech Show, I was not too far away from you at all. Let me just see there who else. Andre, I think that what you've done there is you possibly have put in the name of a stock. So we're going to keep an eye on all of the comments as they're coming in there. So if you do, just pop in. Oh, Robert is tuning in today from New Orleans. You are super welcome indeed, Robert. I was in New Orleans, I'd say about 2 years ago now, at the end of 2019. Hello, Rob. Rob is here from Canada. Now, I'm going to pronounce this Saskatchewan in Canada. How did I do? Not quite sure there. Hello, indeed, Christine. Christine says, hello from Toronto, Canada. Always love your sessions, either live or replay. Delighted to have you here, Christine. And you know what? I'm really glad that we've multiple perspectives. We've got people here from the US, got people here from Canada, got people here from the UK. Also, we have Mitch here from Dallas in Texas. Mitch, haven't made it to Dallas yet. I have been to Austin and I have been to San Antonio. Love Texas State though. Hopefully I go over there at some stage. Let me see, who else have we got here? I see Julie. Julie and Christine are having the chats. Good. That's what it's for, of course. So please do keep your comments coming in and tell us where you're tuning in from. We're only delighted to have you here and to have really, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation from a variety of impacts. As I say, we're going to start off with economic and business, and then we're going to whittle it right down then to looking at some investing opportunities along the way. And please do keep your comments coming here. Now, what I also want to ask is, just as we say in Ireland, just for the crack, I'd love to understand one point from you, and that is how many of you are on Instagram? So just out of interest, how many of you are on Instagram? And I'm asking this for a very particular reason, because I'm trying out something new on Instagram at the moment. So I'm just wondering, will you just tell me in there, tell me in the chat, how many of you are actually on Instagram, that you actively engage on Instagram? Let me just hear that first and foremost. I'll tell you why, is I'd love to have a way to interact with you all apart from through the show. And I'm a big Twitter fan, right? I'm a big Twitter fan. But I'd just like to know, I'm just going to see here. Hello, Edward is here from Southern California. Oh, fantabulous part of the world as well, Edward, particularly San Diego is one of my favorite parts. Julie says she's on Instagram but doesn't engage actively regularly. All right. So I just want to, and also Edward, I see that you're there. Okay, so I'm just going to show you another way to interact with the show, so that after our chat finishes, when this is being run live, how you can continue to have the interaction. Just going to show you, and I just wanted to see what you think. Okay, so I'm just going to pop over here. Okay, Christine says not on Instagram. YouTube is not for me. Perfect. Right, so what I'm going to show you here is on the VectorVest page. So VectorVest on Instagram is simply VectorVest_Inc. Okay, and here is a picture that I took. So if you click here on ESG and Tech, if you go onto this page, well, this is literally me in the corner, right, before I posted this about an hour ago. Okay, so I'm going to go back here to the Instagram story. And in here, you can actually type in your thoughts. I'm going to go back over here. Actually posted there half an hour ago. Your thoughts on the future of public transport. So that space there will give you an opportunity of how you can actually interact just on this topic itself. Now, all of the other stories there I've posted up over the last while. Some of them are stock market related. I love this phrase, money goes where money grows. Steve Chappell taught me that long time ago. So I just wanted to see what you thought about doing something like that, is using our Instagram stories to interact. Just something that we're trying out of recent times. So we can certainly, of course, here is where my primary focus is going to be. But afterwards, if you are on Instagram and if you want to pop in any comments into that Instagram story, that's where I will be keeping an eye on, and I'll be interacting with you there afterwards. Let me see who else is here. Peter says, Netherlands, greetings. Hello indeed, Peter. Been to the Netherlands countless times with VectorVest Europe. Of course, we have given training all over the Netherlands, and I know an awful lot about public transport in Netherlands as a result. So really and truly, you're all super welcome, and we are going to have a really interesting show today where we're going to have lots of conversations about this very important topic. Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to ask you is, just want to get your thoughts in the chat first of all, okay? Do you think public transport in a city should be free? Okay, so the question is, do you think public transport in a city should be free? And, you know, well, I'm going to wait to hear your thoughts on this first, right? So I'm going to take you through a couple of different places around the world. So Mike says yes, okay. I'm going to take you on a couple of cities around the world, and let's take a look at how the actual transport system operates. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to show you one particular transport system in Hong Kong, and I'm also going to show you a couple of other things here. So Mike says yes, Isaac says yes, Edward says yes, I'm 65 years young. Great. That's super. Carl says no. Okay. Because of course, I mean, if it should be free, well, then someone has to pay for it. And then the organisation, of course, that would typically have to pay for it, either would be a government, which is the most natural likely fit, or it could be sponsored by a company. So let me just see. Diana says, I can't think why it should be. It could be cheap to encourage its use. Okay. And by the way, of course, Diana, that typically is the way we see things happening, is that in many, many, many countries, public transport is pretty, low cost, relatively speaking. So Diana says, I can't understand why it would be. Okay, right. Well, we're going to have a conversation around that, and let's look at that. But okay, before I go any further, I am going to point out one system of public transport that is free in Hong Kong, and I'm just going to see what you think of it. Okay. Not alone have I been on that. I have been sitting in a bar in Hong Kong, sitting outside watching when that escalator stops moving at 12 midnight, and watching somebody who said, oh, I'm just going to have the last drink before I go. And then they are sweating the whole way up those steps. But it's an interesting concept, is that we typically think of, let's say, something on wheels that moves. But what about if there was actually a moving escalator instead? So, Julie, if we were to think of this in London, for example, what about if an escalator was to replace the Circle Line around London? What about if we were to look at maybe replacing some parts of the subway above ground in New York? What about if we were to simply move people at a pace where they're simply standing, and therefore if they want to walk faster they can, and then you're not relying on stops and so on like that? So that is an example of a time that it's free. And it's free because it's actually difficult to police, And it's actually something that's very effective. Now, also, Hong Kong is built like this. It really is. It is extremely hilly. I remember one time I was in Hong Kong. I had to walk something like 300 meters, and Google Maps told me it would take It was going to take me something like 8 minutes, and I said, "What? Why would it take me 8 minutes to walk 300 meters?" Because it was basically a vertical incline. Google Maps was right. So the point I'm making here is that public transport may not necessarily mean buses, or may not necessarily mean trains or subways. Maybe it could actually mean something else. Just going to check over here. Lots of chats going on here. Julie says, it's a pretty amazing concept. It's free for me now as I'm 60 plus. It was life-changing for me. But if it were free for everyone, I wonder whether there would be a respect issue. Do we need, though? I'm wondering what exactly that means, Julie. And I'd love to hear more about that. What exactly are we referring to? Are we talking about, only getting on public transport just because it's free? Would people do that? And of course, it also depends on their age and stage as well. Mike says, most public transport runs at a loss in Canada, so we're already subsidising. It may as well be free. That's a good point, Mike. And I'm going to talk to you about what public transport is like in Ireland, and if it was to be made, to be completely free. Again, it's very highly subsidised here too. Let me see. Jim says in Medellin in Colombia, there's also a system like that. It connects to public transportation to the higher places and it's free. Hey Jay, you're super welcome. Julie says, it looks like it's all outdoors in Hong Kong. Yes, but it's covered because when it rains, in Hong Kong, you get wet. You get very, very wet. Okay, so let me take you through what it would be like if we were to completely take public transport entirely, it was going to be government funded in Ireland. Let's just look at this. And I've looked at this from a couple of different ways. So let me just pop on over here and I'm just going to show you where this would be. So first of all, what I did was that I looked at how much we pay in Ireland in tax solely on motor tax, right? This is just on motor tax, nothing to do with anything else. So overall in Ireland, we take, in 2020, we took in 57 billion euro in taxes. And of that, almost 1 billion was spent in motor tax, right? So 999 million euro is what is spent is what is paid to the government in motor tax. So let's just say if that amount was to be ring fenced, if you were to ask private transport owners, namely people who drive cars like me, to pay the tax, and then that would subsequently be invested with a view to making life more public transport accessible, what would that mean? So I went then and I had a look at this, and it says that the Irish taxpayer, at the moment, just like you were saying there, I think it was Mike said it. Yep, Mike. So at the moment in Ireland, we subsidise public transport by 300 million. And Ireland also provides free transport for all citizens aged 66 or over. Now it's also for people with disabilities, etc. And that comes to another 95 million. So currently the country, the government is already paying 400 million for this. And then down here, there would, in a normal year, what companies would make from passenger fares actually equates to 580 million. So as a result then, of course, the government would also have to pay an extra 600 million. So therefore, put all of it together though, if you did put all of it together, it actually pretty much comes together around about the same amount as what is paid on motor tax. Now, of course, what this doesn't include is what about the money that is, for example, being invested at the moment in cycle lanes, which is a massively expanding area in Dublin at the moment. And Cork, I have to say, and another city in Ireland as well. So if we were to take away the costs of policing, so making sure the tickets are actually paid, the time lost by people who are driving public transport vehicles in order to collect payment, inspectors, the actual systems in the background for the accounting and so on, then you're probably going to take a proportion of that money off as well. So overall, you would be looking at an investment of around about 500 million, I would think, 500 million. And then, of course, you would have to go back to Julie's point, you would also then have to think about, would more people use public transport, and thus would there be more pressure on the public transport system, which of course then would take pressure off the private transport systems. Now, let me take a look over here. Ninja says, in the US, Amtrak is subsidised and is not really in most states with large populations like Texas and Florida. True, but is that because you have got a very disparate, they're big states. They really are. So this is my point about the question I was asking is, should it be free in cities? I think it's a different question when you look into rural transport, because you're dealing with far, far, far more disparate regions. You're also dealing with a system that would have to operate on a much greater loss and thus be subsidised to a much greater extent. And of course, the demand on the system is going to be less. So I think that we have a different conversation when we move outside of the cities. Ninja said, I lived in Munich, Germany, working on an airline project and found the transport to be excellent. Absolutely. I mean, having been in Germany several times, not as often as I've been to the Netherlands, but the public transport system there is absolutely phenomenal. Really, really good. However, what I will say is that the road network is not. The road network could certainly do with an awful lot of infrastructure upgrade, but the public transport A is very good and B is very efficient and C is always on time. Julie says, no, by respect I mean care and attention to the public asset by users. For example, okay, in London feet on seats, a sense of entitlement. It's complicated. Okay, I see what you mean. And Julie says, I have perspective lived in 2 different countries and at another time in my life having worked in public transport. Oh, interesting. Isaac says, Amtrak is profitable and a good way of transport in the dense north, east and mid-Atlantic. And again, yeah, that's the point, is that when you've got your demand, like, you know, I have been on a train from flying into Washington and Dulles, Washington, and haven't got a train up to Penn Station in New York. I mean, I've been on trains around the US, all right, where there certainly would be demand from A to B. But I'm going to surprise you with a couple of the statistics that I have now that is coming from a report that just came out this year on public transport. Okay, so the first question that I wanted to ask is that, do you think it should be free? And if so, why should it be so? Julie says, I like the approach of overall taxation helping to subsidise public transport, even in remote areas. And of course, if we're talking about bringing public transport, particularly free public transport, into more remote areas, then we also have to think about social inclusion. We also have to think about access of those people to be able to get to opportunities on a working basis, but on a lifestyle basis. I know a lot of that has changed over the past while since working from home is now different, but it still is a point. Okay, can I bring you now? I'm going to bring you over to Ohio State. Okay, I'm going to bring you over here to Ohio University. And of course, Ohio is one of the places that I have visited the most in the US, given that it is a key part of where VectorVest is based. And I have to say, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Ohio. But I just wanted to show you this. It's an infographic. Let me just pop across over here now. Okay, so here we have, I'm just going to take you through this infographic, which is the future of public transportation in America. Some of these statistics really shocked me, okay? So first of all, as fewer and fewer Americans purchase personal vehicles and environmental concerns grow, what will the future of American public transportation look like? So in 2013, riders took 10.7 billion trips on public transport in the US, and from 1995 up to 2013, ridership grew by 37.2%, outpacing population growth. So what that is telling us is that within the period of time that the population grew between 95 to 2013 by 20%, people actually took more transportation trips in that time. And I think that makes sense. Can I just check also with you today? Pre-COVID, were you traveling more than you were at earlier stages in your life? By the way, I absolutely was. Absolutely was. I was traveling an awful lot for VectorVest. I mean, I was zipping around the world because it was easy. It was easy and it was low cost. I mean, apart from air travel, any other travel. So, but in comparison to, we'll say, what my parents would have done, at my age, I definitely think that I was traveling more pre-COVID. So what about you? Are you actually traveling more? Sorry about that. I was going to take that down. So are you actually traveling more? Do you find that you are, or was that you were traveling more? Because this is what the statistics are telling us, particularly in America today, is that people are actually, or were doing more. They were actually making more trips. They were going more places. And I certainly think that life when I was younger was more in the home. It was more visits between families to the home. Whereas now I think our lives are more outside the home. Whether it's coffee shops, again, pre-COVID, coffee shops or meeting people in certain places, or, you know, when I was younger, weekend trips weren't a thing. It wasn't a thing. You went on holidays when you were, you know, for 2 weeks somewhere, all right, and it was in the country. I've certainly seen that in Ireland change and proliferate over time. So when it comes to how many people travel, or how do people travel, in 1970 there was 112 million licensed drivers, and in 2014 there was 214 million licensed drivers. So of course the number of people that own a car has increased, and I think that's to a large degree down to much greater, or car ownership is down to more people having more money in order to buy one, and of course the necessity of doing so. So according to the Census Bureau in 2013, 76.4% of workers chose to drive alone, 9.4% carpooled, and 5.2% took transportation. And riders use these types of public transportation. 50% was bus, 35% was heavy rail, 4.5% commuter rail, and 4.2% were light rail. Now, I would say, personally, that if you were to ask me this question, is that and particularly the second one, I would use the public transportation that was most easily available. That's what I would do. I mean, in Dublin, we have the bus, and we have heavy rail, but you'd only use heavy rail if you were going outside of Dublin. You'd only use light rail if you were inside of Dublin. So I wouldn't use heavy rail to get to the other side of the city when light rail is available. So I think that an awful lot comes down to what is available for the journey in question. But what I think up here is interesting is that they said 76.4% of workers chose to drive alone. So, can I ask you, right, first of all, before I do, let me take a look here. Christine says, I was doing more local trips, but not international travel. And I think that's the way, like I say, Christine, I think that's the way lifestyle was moving. Julie says, I travelled around far more pre-COVID. I think there was also a significant population explosion between 1970 and 2014. Yeah, by 20%, indeed. Ninja says, Amtrak is not profitable. Subsidies from the US government received $1.4 billion in 2012. To help it out in 2013, it increased its appropriation to $1.8 billion for the fiscal year. Now, I'd have to really look into the back, in behind those figures to really understand as well whether, for example, there in the free travel that is given to public citizens or to citizens over 66 in Ireland, the 95 million that the government spends, I wouldn't necessarily consider that a contribution on the part of the government. They're actually paying for a service there, whereas of course the actual subsidies is different. So I'm not going to get into understanding the nuances of how this works with Amtrak Ninja, but it's a very good point. Edward says, retired in the USA just when COVID started, plan to travel abroad someday when it's safer, you're immune compromised. Okay, I would just love to be back in the US again sometime soon. I really, really and truly. I'm going to Belgium soon. We have got a stand at a stock market show. Sorry, I'm doing my little shoulder dance here. In Belgium in October next month. So I'll be going over there for sure. And I broadcast this last show when I was in the UK as well. And every international trip is like, oh, such an adventure. Let me see what else we got here. Isaac says, if you isolate it by region and discount the fact that other railroad tracks, and yes, there are a few isolated scenarios where it's profitable, but you're right overall, okay? And then Ninja says, prior to COVID, I was an international traveler and some domestic. I was an over 100,000 on airlines mostly. That is a lot of miles for sure. Now, the next thing though that I'm going to ask you, now I just had this chat with Joey, right? Hi Joey, by the way, Joey there is in, he's over there taking great care of us, but I just had this chat with Joey. Can I ask you this question? Because when it says here, 76.4% of workers chose to drive alone, right? Can I now ask you, why do you have a car? Any of you that has a car, why do you have a car? And I asked Joey this question, and Joey, you might just, pop your answers in there as well. Why do you have a car? What is actually the purpose of you having a car? The reason that I'm asking you this is that I do want to move on and actually understand whether public transport could replace private transport if the reason you had a car was actually covered by public transport, right? Hi, says Joey. Okay, so you pop your answers in there. Why do you have a car? And I'm sure one of you will say, well, I know in the case of Joey, anyway, Joey said, one of the reasons that he has one is that he said, well, I need to get to the store. I need to get around. I need to walk out my door and I need to be able to get in to a vehicle that is free, as in available. I don't mean costless. I mean, available. And I need to be able to go to the store and I need to be able to buy what I want to buy, and then I need to drive home. And then he said to me, take my kids to and from school, groceries, and to get to the office when I need. Okay, so all of what Joey is saying says I need to get from A to B. And of course, Joey doesn't want to be necessarily waiting for, the bus to come. And we actually had a chat about this as well. He was just saying if he was to actually get to the bus, he'd have to drive there. So why would you drive, stop, then have to park and all that sort of thing? So an awful lot of that is convenience. So what I found interesting over here, right, is, let me just scroll on down here. Let me go down here, right? I want to show you this here. Look, 45% of households in the US don't have access to public transport. What do you think of that figure? 45%. I think that's a striking figure. Does it surprise me? No, but I think it's a striking figure in the US. 45%. Mike says convenience, weather, distance, low cost of operation. Okay, Mike, I'm going to take that list. Let's take that list and really think about that. Southern California transit system is patchy or slow for longer travel. Yeah, it is such a great place to be though, isn't it? Christine says, when my car lease ended 2 years ago, I didn't get another car as I'm writing the TTC. Bus, subway, streetcar. I do miss driving car, but the TTC is freedom and less dollars. You see, that's the point, Christine, isn't it? That is the point. So let's just now really think, because in order to figure out the future of public transport, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to find ways to solve the problems of why people don't take advantage of public transport today. That's actually what you need to do. So I'm just going to pop back up here now for a moment. So New York's annual heavy rail ridership grew by 9 million. Annual subway ridership grew by 14 million in 2015. I mean, see, this is why I will take it through what happened during COVID, because we can't talk about figures like this anymore. We just can't talk about them anymore without taking into consideration everything that happened over the past 2 years. We just can't. Michael said, I had 2 cars parked in my condo, park installed, planning to sell one soon, really don't need to. It's crazy. Well, that's the thing. I mean, do you need to? I'll give you one statistic, is that on average, a car is parked 96% of the time. And obviously if it's parked, it's not doing anything. So, you know, these kind of car sharing companies, where I can borrow someone else's car for a period of time and come back and give it back, and then they earn a little bit of money while the car is being parked. That was a statistic that I've seen, is 96% of the time your car is actually parked. And I would say in my case, it's at least that. At least, yeah. Let me see who else. Ninja says, I have a car for convenience, and even when I travel so much, I could get to the airport with no problems, especially when leaving for a 5 a.m. flight. Haven't done that in a long time. Julie says 45% is scary. You'd have to run a car. I live in London. I'd love a camper van, but where would I put it when I'm not in it? Definitely, Julie, if you live in London. And then she says, but when I visit my family in Canada, the distances, the GO train is great, but you have to get to the station. The bus service is very, very slow. So you see, right, now we're getting to the issue here, which is, what are the problems the private transport solve? And if they were to be incorporated into public transport, would that change everything? That's where I'm going here. So let me just go down here. Then, of course, we have the price of gasoline, naturally enough. So I'm going to go back to Diana's question, right? And Diana's question is, why would you make public transport free, right? Why? And I'm not necessarily espousing that we do. I was more so thinking around, if you were to truly democratize public transport, what would that mean for the business model? What would that mean is that then I'm no longer the customer paying my €2 bus fare into the centre of Dublin. The government then becomes the main customer, spending €1 billion on making sure public transport is accessible for all. And if you were to do that, you're in the case of what's called, in economics terms, it's a monopsony, which is where you've got one buyer instead of many. Let me see here. Dr. Artisan, would anybody like to hear a great invention idea that I made? Pop it into the chat and we'll have a look at it. Edward says, in San Francisco's son-in-law takes the ferry to work. I mean, again, San Fran, you can just walk everywhere. Well, as long as you have, you know, good fitness to walk for a long time. And I want to show you a company that I'm watching very closely, very, very closely, one to watch for the future, that is trialing something in San Fran that I'm going to tell you about. Now, the benefits of public transport is, of course, it reduces harmful CO2 emissions by 37 million metric tons annually. So from a sustainability point of view, Diana, for example, the more that you increase the participation that people have in public transport, absolutely, then you take cars off the road. Simples. Then traffic eases congestion on heavily used roads. Now, another economic term for you is the paradox of the aggregate. So here's the way it is. During rush hour traffic, it suits me to get into my car, and I may be stressed or maybe not, but I'm going to sit in traffic until I get to my destination. Why does it suit me? A, I can start off at A and I can get to B. B, I can be comfortable. I'm in, I can turn up the heat, I can listen to a podcast, I can close the window, I can admire the view. So it works out for me. And then C, of course, is that I'm taking variables out of the equation. I'm not worried about a bus being late. I'm not worried about something happening where the bus has to stop at 3 stops and then someone is slow getting on the bus or anything else like that. So it helps me. Me using my car for my selfish purposes in rush hour traffic suits me. However, by each person who takes that approach, of which many of us do, because that's why it's called rush hour traffic, actually hurts the aggregate. So what is good for me, the individual, hurts or reduces a benefit available to the whole community, say to everybody who's in traffic. That's called the paradox of the paradox of the aggregate. So of course, if you can get more people using public transport, or like we've seen now, of course, is that if you can remove the need for everyone to be at the same place to be at the workplace at exactly 9 o'clock and it staggers, then of course that moves it out as well. Cost for anybody, and this goes back to the money point there that a couple of you have been making. Cost. Public transport does save a rider up to $6,000 annually, and I found this really interesting, is riders are 3 times more active than those who don't use public transportation. So typically, somebody who doesn't use transportation is active for 6 minutes a day. Now, when I saw this, I was like, 6 minutes a day? Seriously, 6 actual minutes a day. But you know what? This smartwatch thing here has been keeping a good eye on me. I've been keeping a good eye on myself through it. And I have to say, there have been times when I've come in the morning and I've sat down here and I have walked to the bathroom and back. And then I've got out and got in the car and walked and drove home. And of course, where is the activity then? We've moved office since the 1st of June. And I walk in here and I notice that I am investing an extra 200 calories a day 200 calories. I'm burning up 200 calories a day by that walk, even though it's not a long walk and I wouldn't be very cardio active in doing so. But the point is that of course, if you actually have to get to somewhere physically, like walk or cycle, then of course that naturally is going to have that impact as well. Let me go on here now. So Ninja says the government is not spending its money. Government is spending your tax dollars, the uninvited equal partner in your salary. Uninvited, that's an interesting way of putting it. Julie said, I saw some statistics, can't remember where, the people who take public transport are more physically fit than the average car driver. Should that have to be, Julie? That have to be, because you have to get there and you have to get back. Joy, what do you make of this, huh? Let me see. Edward said, soon it'll be a system of car on demand. Now, Edward, I'm going to talk to you about that because it's not soon. I'm going to tell you about that now as well. Mike says, I noticed a lot of people taking trans are smokers. For the cost of cigarettes, you get a lease car. Well, I suppose it depends on... Ideally, you shouldn't have to smoke if you drive, or if you don't. Julie says, up and down the stairs in the tube, I joined Zipcar, but it's nothing like having your own car. I read that book actually by Robin Chase, the one about Zipcar. Really, really interesting. It's called Piers Inc. I'll just put it up there. It's the woman, Robin Chase, wrote it. It's really good. And I recorded a book review on it. I do that quite a bit. Actually, here it is Piers Inc. I found it really good. Really, really interesting. And just the whole idea of the sharing economy. So it's an interesting read. All right. Okay. Now, let me go back over here. What does Diana say? Well, it works for numbers going from same places where population density is high. Happy days. But you have just discussed why it won't work for less populous areas. And that's the point, Diana. Exactly. Diana, sorry. That's the point, is that I think they're two different arguments, aren't they? If you've got high density and if you've got, a business model that supports it, or even if you don't have a business model that supports it, but you can see how there would be a high return on investment for a government from a social inclusion point of view or a lifestyle, or, and there's so many economic reasons for this. It could be foreign direct investment. It could be access to talent. We could go on and on. But that conversation changes a lot when it comes to rural. And that's where I was trying to explore and, really look at the nuances. She says, less pollution is great, but for those doing journeys not standard, i.e. a rep plus others, drivers of stuff, etc. with a car, with music is way nicer. And yeah, again, that is something where you're going to have, as you say, something that's non-standard. So But I would always say though, Diana, is that if we understand the problems and if there's a way in which we could solve them, even taking away traditional thinking, let's see where that would go. So let's go on to the challenges now, and I want to take you on a further trip here. Christine says, I saw a report where someone could in the future own a Tesla and with its AI capacity be able to generate extra money with the car with no driver. You know, my friend in San Diego actually has a Tesla, and like, you know, anytime I've been in it, it's like a new car. It's the same one. It just keeps learning and doing new cool stuff. So that wouldn't surprise me. Now, here we are. So Diana, pick you up on your point here. Here we are. Let's now look at our challenges, right? Long waits at stops. Nobody wants. I do not have time to be standing around waiting. And in fact, even when I am waiting at a bus stop or a train stop, I have the phone out and I'm sending a text or I'm tweeting or I'm now with my new Instagram stories, I am checking out what's going on in the world. Missed departures due to lack of real-time info. Now, let's think about that as well, right? So I'm going to think about all these problems and let these point towards the future. Backup problems related to the transit route. Yep. Difficult accessibility. Certainly when I was on crutches a couple of years ago, I can 1000%, I can concur with that. Is physically getting onto a bus when you're on crutches and when you're on crutches, you lose your hands as well because you're busy carrying your body around. So you can't carry anything. So it's like a ticket. So it's hard. And then we have regulation and cost. Okay. Now, let's think about this. And now let's really trace forward to the future. So imagine if we could remove this problem. Imagine if we could remove the problem of long waits at stops. Imagine if we had real-time information. Let's just take those two. So imagine if I can push a button right now and a vehicle of some sort arrives at my door. You might say, isn't that Uber, Susan? Yeah, it is. For example, that's what it is today. But of course, Uber has somebody driving it. So I asked Joey this. Joey and I were chatting about this as well. Like when Joey checks in for a tech check on, an hour or two before the ESG and Tech Show, he thinks that he's going to check everything and make sure everything's A-okay. You know what? He is form of market research as well. So thanks a million for that, Joey. Talk to you next month. But what I will say is that I asked him the same and I said, why don't you just use Uber? Like, why don't you just use Uber instead of your car? Like, when you're getting your family, let's say, out for dinner or whether it is going to the store, why don't you just use Uber? Why do you need a car? And one of the things he said to me is, but I've always had one. And I think that that's interesting. I've always had one. The reason that I think that's interesting is, will Joey's kids say the same? Joey, will your kids say the same because I've always had one? Because you see, I remember learning how to drive when I was 17, and of course that was status quo, but I do wonder as time goes on. Now, so let's go back to this point. Can I bring you now, can we go, let's go to Phoenix, Arizona. Who's with me? Are we going to Phoenix, Arizona? The reason I want to bring you over there is that I want to show you, what do I want to show you? I know exactly what I want to show you. Here we are, Cruise. Okay, Cruise. Cruise is a company that is based in Phoenix, Arizona. And I've been watching this company. Now it's not listed, but it's one that I'm watching closely. It's one that I'm watching. So it's a better way to get around. And it's basically what I've just described is that you push a button and instead of an Uber driver turning up, is that the car, driverless, would turn up instead. Okay? So if you look at the tech in here, really interesting company here. And I just come down here, right? So here we are, new standards and safety. So 40 plus sensors giving Cruise AVs a 360-degree view to see far and wide and can map the location of surrounding objects within centimeters. So for a start, you've got self-driving technology. It's also got smart thinking because it's doing so with efficiency and without distraction. It's always learning and it is fast acting, okay? Do you know what I found this really interesting here is that 40% of their hardware in this new car is unique to self-driving. You see what I mean, Diana, is I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this from the point of view, not what we have today, but what could we have tomorrow? And how can we as investors think ahead of that? Julie, hold on now, let me go back there, sorry. Ash says, the reason we own cars is that we do not pay enough for the use of road and congestion. We also do not pay enough for carbon tax. If the carbon tax is $100 a tonne and was raised raised, subsidized public transport. Julie says, the public transport in Istanbul is pretty amazing. It works so well. I was astonished. So organized. Yeah, never been. I haven't been to Istanbul. Been to Turkey, all right, but never been to Istanbul. So 40% here of their hardware is unique to self-driving. So you can see here, over here, you can just see how it actually works. And yeah, look at this, right? Just look at that video. This is the way it works. It actually can see further than a human eye. So it actually can, it can see more. And the AV makes sense of this information in a split second. So that's precisely what it is there to do. And then you can also see, you can see a variety of other things here as well. So its services, its services is its new kind of ride. Crank up the volume, have a snooze, or just enjoy the view. Do you know what I also find here is that you talk to people about this. I watched a video one time of somebody who was going on his first test drive in a self-driving car. And it wasn't even self-driving, really. It was a car that you could, like, he sat in and he kind of, started the engine and everything, and he drove it a little bit forward, and then like it decided how to go around and around about all that sort of thing, and just put it in the area. But it wasn't like, he still had to sit in the driver's seat, and he still had to take control of the wheel if something happened. And first of all, he was freaked out. Like, I was the first time I used cruise control, by the way. I was like, oh geez, I'm not sure about this. And then about 4 minutes in, he was getting bored and he was picking up his phone. And at that stage, he had developed enough trust in the car that it was just going to take over. But he also knew that the car would tell him if the car needed him. And then what was interesting then after that was, after a while, then he said, so he was doing this in Miami. And then he said, actually, this car is probably safer than a lot of drivers. It's not drunk. It's not, distracted by a phone. It's not distracted by kids. It's not trying to turn over a dial in the radio. So what I think happens is that over time, people's trust in self-driving cars change. So when you see here, crank up the volume, have a snooze, just enjoy the view, cruise takes care of the rest, that is another level of self-driving. That is sitting in the back, like this woman over here. No driver or uncertain interactions. Hence, the reason I'm asking Joey, are your kids going to know how to drive? Will they need to? It's simple, safe and reliable. You can just relax and be yourself. And then they're also now partnering. Joey, you won't even have to go and get the groceries in the store. It'll be all done for you. Simples. Now, let me just see over here. Julie says, love driving, but I don't have a car. I very much like having a driving license, but having someone else doing the maintenance. Yeah, exactly. Hand it over to someone else. Diana said, I love the idea we can have a Tesla and it can wander off at night being a taxi cab earning money. That's a whole other ball game of having staff, isn't it, Diana? Edward said, rather have my own pod that nests into the self-driving mothership, less germs, and my pod is like a drone bike for last mile delivery. You see, and it's interesting all your thoughts on this and how things are changing. So the first thing I would say in terms of looking forward is, when we are looking at tomorrow and the sense of public transport, I wonder, are we actually looking at tomorrow's different business model for what we consider today to be private transport? If I can walk out of here, I can walk out of my office and I'm going to go outside and my car is going to be outside and I can drive that anywhere. If I can push a button and the same thing happens, but just by the time I get there, it's one of Cruise's cars here in Dublin, what's the difference? Actually, what is the difference? In Joey's case, if he knows that he needs the car at 2 p.m. and he's going to go grocery shopping with his family, what's the difference between him walking out and having his own car there or pushing a button and just having it? Now, the other thing though is like what Edward says is, if you want your own car, if you want to have like we also spoke about a colleague of ours, both of us, Joey and I have a colleague where he was telling me that he just loves to drive, just loves that feeling, the window down, just circling the city, just being in the car. Would he get the same enjoyment if he was just sitting back taking a chill pill? Julie says, I think most people who are driving do not particularly like driving, they just have to do it. Boom, Julie. This is the point. This is exactly the point, is that we might want the convenience. Let me go back up there to Mike's point. Mike, earlier on there, you said, Mike said convenience, weather, distance, low cost of operation. So what, Mike, if I could use a company like Cruise and it was convenient, and in terms of whether I was covered, distance it would go wherever, and it had low cost of operation? Would you still want your own? That is, costs X amount, capital investment, and the maintenance, and where it's parked 96% of the time. That's the question. That is the one that I will be interested to see. Let me see. Julie here says, my experience with Zipcar compared to my own is I know the condition it's likely to be in With Zipcar, you don't know for sure. And these are certainly the challenges that are coming along with it. Now, let's move past the whole, commuter high density areas, and let's now, like Diana was saying, let's go further. Let's take a look at Hyperloop for also some clues of tomorrow. So first of all, Hyperloop is no longer just, imagine if we were to do this. Hyperloop actually had the very first people travelled in Hyperloop on the 8th of November 2020. They're the first people to have travelled safely on a Hyperloop, making transportation history. Now you see here, Mike, I've turned Mike around here. Mike said, if that happened, I would have zero issues with it. You see, that's the thing. I wouldn't either. Now, I'm not giving up the car anytime soon, but certainly I wouldn't have either. So over here, Hyperloop, what exactly is it? So first of all, can I ask you, what is the fastest vehicle that any of you have actually travelled in? What is the fastest vehicle that any of you have ever travelled in, right? I'm going to give you a second there to open that up, and then I'm just going to tell you a little bit of the nuances behind Hyperloop. What's the fastest? I'll tell you my answer. I think the fastest speed it got to, I was taking pictures of it, was a train in Shanghai. A train in Shanghai where I was going from the city out to the airport, and I think the fastest speed was 420 kilometers? Airplane. Yeah, I've travelled in those too. I was meaning on the ground. Sorry. Yes, Edward, Inner, MR Consulting, you're all correct, of course. Sorry, I was thinking of the train. Right, well, now that we've spoken about that, let me first of all, I'm just going to play you what it actually looks like here, okay? So here is just, I'm going to learn more. And
we're driven to explore, to connect, to innovate, to muster the courage to take a giant leap forward. The time has come to ask ourselves again, what is the future we want to build?
All right, team, please confirm you're ready. Ready. Capcom, you are a go for launch countdown.
Pegasus, this is Capcom. Prepare for launch in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch.
Today, the first people traveled safely on a Hyperloop. Tomorrow, Virgin Hyperloop will change the way the world moves with an on-demand, sustainable mass transportation system that connects cities in minutes. The future of Hyperloop travel is real, and the moment is now.
So this is Hyperloop, and it's something that has been spoken about for a long time. Elon Musk was the guy that pioneered it. So what they're aiming for, Inner G84 has just said here, the Hyperloop would be for long distance travel, right, a competitor to airplane or trains. Yeah, absolutely. And the idea is, can you get from San Francisco to Los Angeles in 30 minutes? That is what they're aiming for. And of course, if you could do that, well then how much further could you go? So what I just wanted to tell you here is that, this is the detail behind it, is that in 2013, Musk published his alpha paper, which theorized that aerodynamic aluminium capsules filled with passengers or cargo could be propelled through a nearly airless tube. Now that's the important bit, is you're actually taking gravity out of the equation, at airliner speeds of up to 760 miles per hour. These tubes, either raised on pylons or sunk beneath the earth, could be built either within or between cities. He called it the fifth mode of transportation and argued it could help the way we live, work, trade and travel. The most eye-catching scenario he proposed was a trip from LA, Los Angeles to San Francisco in only 30 minutes. Now, of course, there is no doubt about it. This is A, not complete, right? B, of course, could be fraught with problems. And if you, like when I read this piece, it goes on to all of the engineering challenges that could be in it, never mind cost. But the thing is that it has now moved from imagine if into a reality. So imagine if, right, let's say I said I'd love to get back to the States. Would, absolutely. And if I was to fly from Dublin to New York at the moment, it would probably take around about 5 hours on the way out and around about 6 on the way back. Okay, so 5 hours. If I want to go to Chicago, it would take me around about 8 hours, right? So it takes me 8 hours to get out. But imagine if I could actually go under the Atlantic. Julie, this one is any of you who are over this side of the Atlantic, right? Imagine if I could go under the Atlantic. Imagine if I could get a train basically through the ocean, and I get in Shannon, let's say, in Ireland, and I get out in New York, and let's say it takes me 4 hours. And I simply get on and I get off. So I don't land in JFK, or I don't land, well, Boston Logan is in Boston anyway, but like, I mean, there's lots of airports that we'd all know. Julie, London, good God, good God. That is certainly a place where when you land in Heathrow, you're actually still as far away from the city as you are in Dublin. So the point I'm making here is that imagine if, just to take, imagine if I was to take inner G84's idea, is that imagine if we could actually do that on a train, would I ever need to take a plane again, with its carbon footprint, with, of course, its speed, and with the fact that airports are outside of the cities, well outside the cities. Would I take the train instead? Now, I have to say, when I looked at that video, though, you don't exactly see them sitting down and enjoying a coffee along the way, do you? Okay, so let me see, what else have you got going on over here? So you said the video showed something about getting from A to B in a hurry, but what about the actual journey? Yeah, well, I mean, if you had to sit for 30 minutes like that, as I say, I'd imagine you'd have to have, it doesn't look like a place anywhere where, you could kind of just have your coffee and chill out, but maybe I could be wrong. Julie says the Eurostar from St. Pancras Station to France. Yes, yeah, exactly. From St. Pancras Station to France. I've also been on the oh, sorry, that is what you're talking about. Yeah, the Eurostar. Yeah, I've been on that. Where I've left in London, I've gotten off in Belgium. Yeah, something like that, only faster. Or, of course, le train de grande vitesse, the TGV. The TGV in Paris, of course, or in France, is a very, very fast moving system as well. Now, of course, before we move into the investing side of things, I do need to point out to you what has changed, right? What has changed? Where are we? I want to bring you back over here. No, I've gone through all those. Yeah, okay. Is I wanted to point out to you what has changed as a result of COVID, okay? And that is that it says, first of all, more than half of Americans are using public transport less or not at all, and up to 1/3 of people in some cities have stopped using public transport because of the pandemic. Whether they'll ever get back on board is impossible to predict, but according to research into the travel habits of people in 104 cities across 28 countries, lockdown, the rise of remote working and stay-home orders have all meant a reduction in the volume of people commuting. And they look at Greece and they look at a variety of other places, but I'm just going to bring you down here to this statistic down here. This is from America, and 11% of people say, I no longer use public transportation, and 41% I use public transport less frequently. Put those two together and you get to 52%. So 52% of people have reduced or eliminated their use of public transport. 34% said it didn't affect the frequency, 12% said I use it more, and then 3% have said I switched to other modes of transportation, which kind of doesn't really tell us anything. So we are aware, of course, that sharing space, and you've mentioned it, Julie, with Zipcar, sharing space with people in public, the perception of that has changed, but will it persist is really a question. There is one last area that I think that if you look at this, that COVID has accelerated what was well happening anyway, and that is smart ticketing. Look at smart ticketing over here. So smart ticketing is, I'll just show you where I came up with this, is that if you look at the next phase of public transportation, driverless buses and trains, we've discussed that in the context of a company like Cruise, but smart ticketing is another, is I get one ticket and then I can get to wherever I want to go. I just get to wherever it is then I want to go. So in Hong Kong, the Octopus card allows cardholders to pay for trams, buses, ferries, trains, public parking meters, shops and swimming pools. Progressively, we're getting kind of further towards that in Ireland. And I think, look, from a user point of view, one card can solve everything, but then you have to break up the accounting afterwards. I would imagine that it's not that difficult a problem to solve accounting-wise. Politically, it could be a different area. But smart ticketing is certainly a nuance of public transport that is well worth watching. Let me see here. Let me see. We need virtual reality to make the Hyperloop feel like travel. Beam me up, Scotty, says Edward. Inner G84 says, I'm sure you've covered this, but from the Hyperloop EV, bus companies like Vicinity Motors, Arrival and Green Power would still be needed to provide bus for public transport. I think it'll come back. Well, you can't have Hyperloop, you know, between two tiny spots in a city. You will need something, but the question is, would driverless transport become what would replace there? And let me see, yeah. So I see Mike and Julie are trading motorbikes. Okay, so now let me go back over here to smart ticketing. I want to show you a list of things that are happening, right? A list of things. March 2021. Companies introduced the White Label Alliance, which responds to the increasing global demand for next generation discrete payment solutions for domestic and private label brands. Then I look down here, an agreement with environmental organisation Parley for the Oceans. This agreement aimed to produce and offer environmentally friendly payment cards. IDEMIA formed a partnership here with a biometric technology company. Like now I pay, right? Now I pay for things with my phone. I don't pay with my card, and I start off going, oh, but I don't turn my card into my wallet. Actually, it's super simple. And because I have to, you know, hold it up to the reader, but then it has to look at my face, then there's actually greater safety features involved then, rather than me actually putting in a PIN code, because of course if someone sees the PIN. Now I know there's obviously ways around it and everything else like that, but I do think that the biometric data and smart ticketing, if you can combine those two together. Now, personally speaking as well, I think what we do need is that we do need some form of ability for people with disabilities to get a sense of how accessible a city is in certain areas as well, and what, because believe me, when you have one in my case, it was small and it was temporary. It still really limited my own mobility when I was, you know, I was that way for a year when I was on crutches or a boot for a year. So when you really are struggling, like when you're really struggling, when steps aren't an option, when they're just not an option, when you can't stand for very long, you're always thinking ahead in so many ways. So I think smart ticketing could actually factor other data like that in as well. Julie says, smart ticketing, yes. When I'm in the Toronto area, there is a system. It's great. Oyster in London is pretty good. Yes, it is. I agree. The Oyster card is brilliant. So you can see here that there are a range of different ideas that are, and this is today. I always think that when we talk about the future of anything, the clues are all around us, but they're nuanced. And of course, some of these won't work because they won't be profitable, or maybe they won't have the resources to expand their reach, or maybe an innovative solution might overtake them, or maybe it may not fit for the product or the culture of the way in which we work, but they're clues to the future. And that's why it's worthwhile watching. Now, one last thing I want to say before we move on to the investing side, which is I wanted also to look at the transport of goods, right? How things move. And the reason that I wanted to look at this is, of course, e-commerce. E-commerce is it's something that I come up a lot here in ESG and tech, because the technology underpinning e-commerce is always growing. Again, COVID accelerated a trend that was already happening anyway. And it just seems to be that the way in which to do business now is to do business online when you're dealing with consumer markets. So I looked here, right? I looked here at the way in which things change over the past year, and the 5 largest markets in the world. The UK has been the biggest e-commerce spender for years. I've been looking at this for about 10 years, and the biggest e-commerce spender has been the UK. I thought by now Australia would be higher, but it's actually the UK, Singapore, then Spain, Argentina, and Brazil, right? So over here in the average amount spent online in the UK, Judy, are you one of these? Is $1,697. The next one then, as you can see, is Singapore and so on. But if you look here at the amount that's actually being spent, look at the growth. The growth is really significant. It's really, really, really significant. They're all double-digit figures. Argentina, 44% in electronics and physical media. Look at what people are buying up here. Toys, DIY and hobbies, electronics, food, personal care, fashion, beauty. They're things. They're not services. They're not Spotify or Netflix. They're things. And if the people are buying things, well, then things have to get there for them. So what I just thought was an interesting thing to do is I just wanted to go to, I must have closed it. Okay, I'll do it again. All I'm going to do here is I'm just going to search for the term e-commerce, but what I'm going to search for is news. Just news. Here we are. And look at what, because I did this earlier on, look at what is here. When you search for this, all you see is expansion. You see a company there that's raised 55 million. DHL, the Dutch, German courier company investing 300 million plus in automation facilities and in the US. Let me go on here. Zenith sells latest Chromemaster original e-commerce exclusively in its own website. Importance, okay, the fastest growing e-commerce markets. Like, it's all expansion. So that then leads me nicely to 3 key things that I want to do from an investing point of view to wrap up today. By the way, before I get on to that, can I ask you if you're enjoying today's episode? I'm loving today's episode. I'm loving all the interaction from you all. I love the interaction between you all. But if you do, can I please ask you to like this video? You can just minimize the comments. If you're on a mobile device, that's what I'm looking at over here. If you're on a mobile device, if you just X the chat for a moment and then press the like button and come back over to the chat. I'd really appreciate if you'd like this video. And also, please do press the share button and, pop it into WhatsApp groups. For anybody who is interested in technology and sustainability, pop it into WhatsApp groups, or maybe send it in a text, or ask people to of course subscribe to the channel as well, so you're always updated on every single show that we have. Thank you, Edward, really appreciate that. And Energy 8, thank you. Julie, thank you very much. I really appreciate your lovely feedback. Means an awful lot to us, it truly does. So please do like. And if you could like the video, keep your comments coming as we now move into the investing section, and then we will wrap up today. Okay, now, first things first is arising from what I was reading there around e-commerce. Very specifically, if I was to take the aspect of what transportation companies are looking very promising when we look at the growth of e-commerce, because of course we do see a decline in public transport in many of the companies that we're looking at. Let me see. Inner says, I'm wondering if you all have been covering the Battery Show Expo. I haven't anyway, but thank you for asking. So what I did was that I took a look at this, right? So I just looked at, best transport stocks, right? I looked around, sometimes I look at VectorVest to suggest ideas, and it's very good at doing so. And then sometimes I look at other places to see what VectorVest thinks. And I haven't necessarily kind of done that with you before, is where I've looked at, okay, what are other people saying are good stocks to look at, and how would we analyze them in VectorVest? So over here, here's 4 of them: UPS, Union Pacific, JB, Hunt, Transport Services, and Kirby. So we take those 4 stocks. The Motley Fool there explains why they think that these are interesting stocks. And now let's head on over to VectorVest and see what VectorVest thinks of that. Okay, so I'm going to move you over here. Let's pop on over here to the VectorVest program. And what we're going to do is we're going to analyze those 4 stocks. And before I get to that, I just want to point out one big change that has happened in the past couple of days. And that is right here. Okay. Is that we are now in a position in the US where we have got a confirmed up call. Okay, so we've got a confirmed call up. So that means that the market, the most conservative signal of all the market timing indicators in the VectorVest system, is now green and happy. Now, of course, we have, though, over here, we've got a lot of red. We've got a lot of red going on. Red is not good. Green is good. Red's not good. And what we can see here is a couple of warning signals. So I just want to help you analyze the overall market before we get into individual stocks, because it is really important that you take a look at what's going on in the market before making any decisions on a stock specific basis. So here's a couple of warning signs for you, right? Number 1 is we can see a lot of red. See a lot of red here, okay? We can see red lights, and red lights means that day over day and week over week, the market is in decline based on our method of measuring it. As you can see here, we've price. Over here, we've relative timing. And over here, you can see then we've the buy-sell ratio, okay? Now, I won't get into analyzing each of these individually because that would take a good bit more time. But can I just check, Joy, with you? Would you mind just maybe popping the link there into the chat? If people wanted to get a market timing report, the daily color guard report, where could they go? Would you mind just popping that in there? So if you do want really good and deep insight into the market timing of the overall market, Joey's just going to pop a link there into the chat. Now, second thing, the MTI here is the market timing indicator, and that is below 1. It's been below 1 now for the past couple of days, okay? So just be careful about that, as well as when the MTI goes below 1, that is kind of saying the market's getting a bit chilly. And then the other thing that I can see here is we're on a primary wave down. A primary wave down is that the market is down week over week. Over the past 5 days, the market is down. So just be aware that the confirmed up call was given. And it's not that there's anything wrong with the confirmed up call. It's that the market changes all the time. And what VectorVest is very, very good at doing is finding a way to establish how long that trend is persisting. Because like if you're a day trader, you don't care what happens tomorrow. All you care about is the hours that's left in today. But if you're a more long-term, buy and hold for a while type of investor, you do care about what happens over the long term. You don't really care what happens today or indeed tomorrow. Okay, so there you can see we're now in a confirmed up call, which is the most conservative view of the market, but it's chilly. It's chilly out there, and it's not. We certainly haven't been given a confirmed call down. We haven't been given that. And we're on a yellow light at the moment. So I'm not necessarily saying that you could see that. But what I am just saying is the market at the moment is in a little bit of disagreement. Long term, we kind of have a better feeling, but short term, we don't. So just be careful and just make sure if you're going to go into the market and you're going long, that you see green lights, you see the MTI above 1, the primary wave is up, or we're in a confirmed up call. Depending on the nuance of that needs to be tailored to you. Okay, now, yes, indeed, energy. I have bought and sold Extro Technologies. Yeah, know who you're talking about, all right. Bought and sold them in my time. So let's pop on over here. So what I did was that I put the 4 stocks that I found there in that piece into a graph. And I just wanted to look at and see what was going on here and what I would do, right? What I would do if I was to analyze any of these 4. So let's take it from the top. So first of all, we have the stock here, JHBT. So it's Hunt JB Transportation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by talking about the stock from a technical point of view, and then I'll go in and I'll take a look at it from a fundamental point of view. So technically, here's what I'm seeing, right? So if I knew nothing about technical analysis, and technical analysis is the way in which you would analyze a stock solely from the point of view of its graph. If I knew nothing about technical analysis, what I would learn is about RT. RT is a stock's direction, its magnitude, and its dynamics. Okay, so that means that if it goes up, if it's going up, it's above 1. If it's below 1, it's not favorable. If it's going up very quickly, it's going to be higher towards 2. If it's going down very quickly, it's going to be closer to 0. And if it's super, super dynamic, there's a lot of volatility. Again, that intensifies the number that it's going to have. So if you see an RT around about 1, well then it typically will be, if it's at 1, well then you'll see very little happening with the stock prices, can be quite flat. So when I look at this graph here though, this is telling me about whether it's the buyers or the sellers are winning the battle. Here I can see that the buyers are winning the battle here, winning, right? And I can see that here because what's going on is I can see that the momentum of the market is pushing up. The relative timing is pushing up over 1, so we go from being less than favorable to favorable, right? So that's very positive. However, that isn't what has been going on since around about the start of the month. If I zone in here, here's what I'm going to see. I'm going to see here is that I can see here that the momentum has been going up, but over here I'm seeing down. Now, I'm also looking here and I see that the RT is just turned around here. So this is telling me the sellers are beginning to win. The sellers are pushing down. Now, the fact that the market started off here, it started off yesterday. Where did it start? It opened yesterday at 160. Sorry, that's not today. That's not yesterday. That's today. It started off today at 169 euros and 10 cents. As of now, it is at 170.67. So right now we can see that the buyers are turning it around, and you can see that being reflected over here in the RT as well. Therefore, technically, if I was looking at this from a buy point of view, if I was interested in this stock, I would be watching that very closely. I'd be seeing if that continued, and if so, it looks like there that the sellers have worn their way out, but if those sellers start selling again, then I would be careful. So right now, I'd be watching how this is developing. I would be, remember, it's a whole recommendation at the moment. I'd be looking at the other fundamental elements of it, but from an entry point of view, I think that at the moment, it looks interesting. You could be just at the start of a new trend. Now, let's move on to our second one here. Union Pacific, right? I'm not saying the same thing. Really not saying the same thing. Basically, the opposite has happened here, right? So what we're seeing is we're seeing that the RT is going down, right? So down, 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 down. Don't like that. Do not like that. Sellers are selling, 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 and they are not done yet. It opened today at 203.43, and it's currently at 203.32. It's dropped another cent there as I was speaking. I wouldn't be buying. I wouldn't be going in. I wouldn't be entering a stock like this. No, sellers are not done yet. Look at the RT. The RT is on the way down. It hasn't turned around. So I would just wait. I would wait until the sellers have just worn themselves out. And then if I was interested in the stock from a fundamental point of view, then I would be considering it. But right now, nope, not for me. So just be aware of that point. You can just be aware of that point, and I would be watching then for this to turn, and particularly I would be waiting for the RT to go above 1. Okay, let me go on to our next stock over here. Our next one here is UPS. Now, UPS offers me a little bit of a conundrum, really. First of all, the trend here of RT is rising. Okay, so I can see that the trend is rising. So no doubt about that, but the thing is that it has bounced down here and then it's turned up again. It's just at that funny phase. Okay, it's at a funny phase now, because what you can see is that it hasn't broken up over 1. The decline in the price has happened. Okay, so the decline in the RT relative time, it has fallen below 1. Are the sellers finished selling? I don't know yet, and I'll tell you why I don't know yet. Is look. We can see here that the buyers bought, okay, but when they pushed the price up here the next day, they didn't get very far, right? They didn't actually get very far. The price, was higher than yesterday, but it actually fell. So this is where you have to watch candlestick closely, is that the price opened here at 194.71 and it closed at 194.39. So the share price fell during the day, but it actually rose relative to the day before. But the next, as you can see, gave away all of that. It gave it all back to the market. All of it. Gave it all back. And almost all of this as well. Here we can see that the stock market today, or the price here is open today, and it is significantly higher. But we're not past this yet. I don't feel that the buyers and sellers are definitive on where they're at the moment. So if I was interested in UPS, I would watch it if I was interested in it fundamentally, but I would just let that. I would really much prefer to see the RT break over 1 before being happier with that stock. And then the last one. Kirby Core. I'm not happy here. I'm not happy for a different reason. Okay, I'm not happy here, and I'll tell you why. Let me just put on the stop loss. Stop loss, stop. There we are. Okay, let me just put on the stop loss. Now, I'll tell you why I'm not happy here at all, is because it has broken its stop loss. It's broken the VectorVest stop loss. Here's how I know. Is it's been having, hold and sell recommendations. I'm not happy about this at all. So I would prefer, like VectorVest only gives a stop loss when the stop loss is basically a smart moving average indicator based on the last 13 weeks, and it's adjusted for risk. But just not happy here. It's broken over the stop loss, and I would need, now look, things could change, but at the moment I'm seeing that the RT is below 1. I'm seeing that it's had a sell recommendation here all the while. This just isn't really one for me. And I think fundamentally when we would get to look at this stock, I don't think I'm going to be overly enamored either. So that's what I'm seeing overall that's jumping out to me here is a stop loss here. RT is below 1. I'm just not feeling it here. And it's for those reasons. When I say I'm not feeling it, they're particularly the reasons that I would go for. Can I ask you in the audience, tell me, are you more fundamental or are you more technical investors? Because I'm now going to go and I'm going to take a look at one of these stocks, because I'm aware I've gone way over today. Geez, but you're great fun, and that's why I'm still here. I'm going to let me just go up here. I'm going to take a look here at JBHT. I'm going to take a look at JBHT here as an example. So Edward, you're more technical, okay? And if you have anything else to add in there, Edward, please do Please do pop it in. JBHT. Okay, let me go back over here to the viewer. Energy, okay. JBHT. Okay. I'm going to right click here. I'm going to view full stock analysis report here. And let's take a look at what's going on. Okay, so we can see here that at the moment the current price is 170, the value is 187, so it's pretty fairly valued. Up here then we've got an excellent relative value here. So we can see that the value is at the relative value is at 1.4, well above 1. So we've got very good long-term price appreciation potential. Down here then, I can see we have an RS, relative safety of 1.24, which is good. And it is. I mean, it's good. It's good. Not amazing, but it's good. And so that's predictability and consistency of financial performance. RT, well, look, we've already discussed this. You know my thoughts on this, is at 1.07. I'd be watching what's going on. It is above 1, but I want to see that keeping going if I was going to go into that stock. Love the fact that we've got a very, very good comfort index here. Stock's ability to withstand severe and our lengthy price declines. But here's where the action is. Here's where the action, in my opinion, really is. Very good earnings growth here of 20% a year. Last time we heard 20% was the population growth from the 70s until 2013 there in our infographic. Earnings per share is at $7.06 per share, which means nothing to anyone unless you compare it to the price. And that is that our earnings yield is an earnings yield of 4.14%. Or on the other hand, we have a PE ratio of 24, which is quite solid. It's not it's not hugely value based, but it's also not some of the really high premia that you can pay for a stock that's higher than that. We've got a dividend here then as well of $1.20, and that represents a dividend yield of 0.7%. Of course, dividends these days aren't that easy to find anyway. And we can see, lots of volume, around about 500,000 shares traded there a day, and sales growth of 36%. So that would be the one that I'd be watching most of those four. Is I want to see it from the point of view of technically, right, look at overall at the market, and I would be conscious of where we're at in the market at the moment. I'd be looking at the stock. If it was me, I wouldn't be going in right away, but I told you what I'd be watching. And fundamentally, I think the stock has some interesting things going on there. So on this super long session, and thank you very much, Mike. Thank you so much indeed for your lovely comment. He says, excellent session. Badger there says, how about FTX in a downtrend but bouncing off support and great rising EPS? You know what? I would love to continue on and on, but I really have to wrap this show up because, of course, I was only supposed to be here for an hour. But sure, look, here we are. Julie says mostly tech, but I check the VectorVest fundamentals. I always check the fundamentals, and I check the tech for the entry and exit points. That's what I do. I gave a user group session back in December. I gave it where I had 10 use cases of RT, relative timing, to show how I've used relative timing to make decisions. It could be really, really helpful indicator. So, on that note, I'm going to say thank you all so much for being here. I thoroughly enjoyed today. And thank you for going with me on the journey. You've really gone with me. We looked into the past, took a lot of, your own feelings about this and how you think public transport might change, where maybe the lines between private and public transport, maybe where they could be woven. We understood the challenges. We looked at this from a government point of view, an economic point of view, business point of view, consumer demand point of view, and then of course we finished up then with the investing point of view as well. We have spanned Hyperloop. We have looked at e-commerce. We have looked at self-driving cars. We have looked at smart ticketing. We have truly looked at how all of this is looking forward from a technology point of view and had sustainability at its core. So thank you so much indeed to each of you. Julie says thank you to Joey. Yes, Joey always deserves great thanks. Absolutely indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Edward. And I really love your comments there as well, Christine. We loved having you. And of course, like I say, please do share this episode with anybody who you feel it might be of interest to. We love having new viewers, and I'm going to see you again third Wednesday of the month. So I'm going to see you in October and for a whole new show. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Yeah.